Welcome back to Feeling Seen, the podcast about the movies that make us feel seen. I'm your host, Jordan Crucchiola, and it is a dream to have today's co-host with us. DeWanda Wise stars in and co-produced the Blumhouse movie Imaginary, which is now out on streaming. She's also in the upcoming film Pool Man, directed by Chris Pine. You might recognize her from all kinds of places. She reprised the iconic role of Nola Darling in Spike Lee's Netflix TV adaptation of She's Gotta Have It. She saved Chris Pratt from a frozen lake in Jurassic World Dominion, and appeared on the show Underground and the film Something Great. She's feeling seen by the emotionally sensitive May Boatwright in The Secret Life of Bees. We'll talk about that, as well as how DeWanda uses that emotionality to navigate not just her performance, but also her career in Hollywood. Actor, producer, polymath? DeWanda Wise, what else do the people need to know about you before we get started today?
I'm a phenomenal cook.
Really?
The only reason why I mention it is because I realized that none of my, bless them, and congratulations to all of them, none of my close friends cook.
Oh, that's my happiest of any evening is just everybody around the kitchen, and I get to cook for everybody, and the bigger the party, the better the meal.
So satisfying.
Now, I recently got Latrice Royale to talk about doing a seafood boil. What is, as their sort of like closer meal, what is your go-to then?
Well, at the present, my partner is really into oxtail.
Ooh, oxtail's having a moment.
Oxtail's having a major moment, which is also upsetting because that also means it's expensive.
Now it's expensive. Oxtail used to be what you got. No, it's what you got because it was a more affordable cut of meat, and now it's like gourmet pricing.
Yeah. It's like $30 at Wegmans. But anyway,
that is ridiculous.
That is what is in the oven as we talk, as we speak.
Oh gosh, I'm so jealous of all who will participate in that. Well, may I begin by saying that in my research for getting to talk to you, may I tell you how I felt seen in some things that I heard you discussing, actually?
Yes, please.
I heard you on a podcast with your husband, and you guys were talking about, I believe the podcast was called Black Love, and you guys were talking about the arc of your relationship, and it made me feel so nice. I met my wife last March, and we decided in July to get engaged, and then by October we were married. And
was everyone freaked out?
It required a lot, but this is, and it's like, listen, it makes sense to us. So we're just cut. And I heard you talking, as you worked through that conversation, you talked too about how, kind of the nature of your jobs and your lives at the time you met, meant that you were spending a lot of time together right at the outset. And it was the same thing with me and my wife. And the first week we started hanging out, I went to dinner with a friend on a Wednesday. And I was like, I've seen Moa 4 times this week, and there have only been 3 days. And my friend was like, well, that's fantastic. I love that. So that's really how we started. And I really liked hearing someone else talk about that.
Yeah. It's so surreal because one of my best friend in the world also just met her person, and then they got married within the year. Yeah. And both of us are on year 15, and we're like, it's great. It's just not. And we also were kind of obnoxious too, because if anyone is ever oh, marriage is hard, we're always like, no, it's not. Stop saying that.
Stop with this bad propaganda.
Stop saying. It's just I don't know why we love to just regurgitate things that are just people just say all the time. And nothing has to be anything.
One of my favorite things I ever saw on Twitter was somebody be like, fellas, is it that fellas, is it gay to concert? Fellas, is it gay to love your wife? To just not live your life complaining about the ball and chain kind of situation.
It must be, man. These locker rooms, right? That's what I blame. I don't actually know.
I don't actually know. No, okay. So this is, I feel like this is not related to what we're going to talk about, but I feel like to me, the sort of challenge that in intimate relationships and intimate partnerships is that's the fun part. For me, the digging into that and the kind of challenge of that and the rigor of it and the sort of continuous maintenance of it, that's where I find so much of the fulfillment in it is oh my God, we get to know each other for the rest of our lives.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I I was about to blame the stars. I was like, I'm a Gemini, he's a Sagittarius.
I'm a Gemini. Please blame the stars. Yes.
But yeah, there's something intrinsically, both because our lives are insanely transient.
Right.
You know, he's an actor too, right? But also, it's just like sometimes I'll just be like, oh, you're over that now.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, there's this thing that occupied however much, you know, amount of your like time or energy or brain space, and like, oh yeah, we don't talk about that. And it could be something mundane. Like it could be like, remember when we were really into parfaits?
Parfaits specifically.
Like we had a good run on parfaits, you know.
I really like that.
And we just don't do that anymore, you know. And there's a lot about both of us where it was like, you know, and I journal too, so I can especially see like, oh yeah, we were really something I was working through personally, or he was working through personally, or we were working through together, and just like it's not a thing anymore.
Well, this the personal working through, the connecting with people, the passage of time, I'm going to use that as our springboard into the character that you have presented to discuss today, which this was the finally I was like, I've meant to watch The Secret Life of Bees for so long, and I never have. This is the Gina Prince-Bythewood movie from 2008, and your character choice is Sophie Okonedo's May of the Boatwright sisters trio in this movie.
Yes.
And what a beautiful and heartbreaking choice that is.
Are you August Boatwright?
No. I'm June Boatwright. August is my sister. You came to see her?
Hi, I'm May Boatwright. I'm August's sister, too.
Is she expecting you?
I just saw some honey at the store, and the man said
You come for honey? Why don't you say so? Come into the parlor. I'll go get her.
Then after that, she gonna go get September and October.
Tell me more, please.
I think, you know, it's one of those things where it's really funny because it doesn't matter. I was joking. I just did this like really fun little cameo thing and it's a comedy. And I turned to my co-stars and I was like, you know, it's really hard, like crying in a comedy. And they were like, DeWanda, I can't relate. I don't know what you're talking about. Like none of us have ever been required. And it really does not matter what I do. Like, you know, like there's a moment in Someone Great. There's a moment in fatherhood. Like it doesn't matter if I'm working on drama or horror, or, you know, anything.
Yeah.
There's always a real moment of drop in, and it's not difficult for me.
How come y'all got names from Canada? Mama loves spring and summer. We had an April too, but she died when she was little. Fix that car.
What's it, me, y'all?
She upset because you won't marry Neil.
See that? She gonna marry me and quit upsetting your sister.
Get out of here.
Like whenever anyone asks about like that skill set.
Right. How do you do it?
I'm like, that's not a skill set. I'm high on the neurotic scale. And
the skill set for me is not crying. So there you go,
exactly
guys.
It. And that is exactly it. The skill set for me is truly not, the skill set for me is not crying. Like and I was that kind of kid. And I remember seeing The Secret Life of Bees for the first time. And it made me go back and read the book. Just that level of like that bone deep bodily empathy.
Yeah.
You know, the kind of empathy where you're like, oh, I can't really watch the news this week.
Right. Yeah.
It was just so beautifully done. And thankfully, growing up being that kind of kid, you know, more than anything, I was just really thankful that I felt like I had, you know, a level of protection in both my mother and my older brother, and that there was no, you know, attempt to like condition it out of me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is what Secret Life of Bees, we have Dakota Fanning plays a little girl in South Carolina, and I believe it's the 1960s, and she and her like caretaker, her nanny Rosaline, played by Jennifer Hudson, they flee when she disrespects a white man and ends up getting like beat up and then like going to be incarcerated, but she's waiting in the hospital to get fixed up before they take her. And Dakota Fannings's going to run away from her abusive father. And she collects her nanny and basically absconds with her from the hospital. And she sets out on a path of sort of self-discovery to find out more about her mom, and ends up this town she knows her mom used to live in for a bit, or at least pass through. And she ends up in an apiary. She ends up at a beekeeper's home. These three sisters, the Boatwright sisters, May, June, and August, Sophie Okonedo, Alicia Keys, and Queen Latifah. What a trio.
What? I know.
What a trio. And they take her in. And June, the skeptical sister, is like, August, we can't bring them in. They're going to bring trouble with them. Like, that they're lying. That this isn't their whole story, why they're here. Because Dakota Fanning has spun a creative tale about what's brought them there. And Queen Latifah is like, I have to do this. You just have to let me do this.
This is bullshit. You know she in some kind of trouble.
Well, who's gonna take them in if we don't? No one around here.
So what if that trouble follow them?
I need to do this. All right?
And then there's May, who is just like pure nurturing and pure heart and empathy. And she had a twin sister when they were little. And when she lost that twin, as Queen Latifah's character tells us, it was like she suddenly felt the pain of the world around her. And we're told over and over again in, mid-century America, like, you should just have her institutionalized and give her up. But instead they were like, no, we will find ways for her to be herself and let her live as herself with us for the rest of her life.
That wall behind the house, why does it have little pieces of paper in it?
Oh, that's May's wall. She made it herself. I guess she noticed she a little different, huh?
She sure gets upset easy.
She had a twin sister, April.
The one who died.
Mm-hmm. It's like the two of them were one soul sharing two bodies. If April got a toothache, May's gum will plump up red. One time my father used a belt strap on April, I swear, welts rose up on May's legs too. When April died, it was like the whole world became May's twin sister. And we tried for years to get her help, but the doctors just kept telling us to put her away. So June and I come up with this idea of the Wailing Wall.
What kind of wall?
The Wailing Wall, like the one in Jerusalem. The Jewish people go there to mourn. See, they write their prayers on tiny pieces of paper, and then they tuck them in the wall.
And that's what Miss May does.
Those bits of paper are all the heavy feelings May carries around. Seems like the only thing that helps her.
Poor Miss May.
Yeah, poor Miss May.
So for you to say that feels, too, like it mirrors that web of acceptance that May had around her in this movie to carry the weight of being herself.
Yeah, that felt like that web of acceptance. Acting felt like that. Like I started acting when I was 15 and I was like, oh, I could put this here. Oh, that's good. That's great. So I feel like, since it's just that and having the most safe friends in the world and just, continuing to find communities like of safety and build communities of safety.
I think that kind of goes hand in hand to me with what I've read of you talking about, like, that, like, really trying to distance yourself from, like, the hustle culture of Hollywood and the nature of, like, you were like, nobody asked Tom Hanks why he wasn't in Forrest Gump in Philadelphia in the same year. Like, to ask people to have such prolific output and judge them against a prolific output lest they be not doing enough, and building a space of community and self-preservation. I wanted to hear you talk about that more, and whether or not, like, is that something that has been difficult to foster for yourself because the mores of the industry seem to suggest you do otherwise all of the time? Or has that been a pretty clear red line for you?
I think what it's been more than anything else is a matter of being really steadfast about it.
Yeah.
And, and consistent. Because it's one thing to, what it requires is a bit of assuaging your reps.
Yeah.
Because they're also, very conditioned we're all very conditioned by capitalism and output, and they're accustomed to, their clients being like, I need you to give me a job.
Yeah.
So part of it is requires the kind of leadership that's assuring and inspiring, and also, if I'm only working on, if I have the privilege, and it's a privilege that comes at cost, right? It's a privilege where, obviously if I work more, I could be making a whole lot of money and blah, blah, blah. I don't know what people buying things and, living whatever. But, having a super honest conversation with myself and a super honest conversation, with anyone listening. It's just like, well, what do I need?
Yeah.
What do I want? What do I actually need? What, in fact brings me fulfillment? And, if I enjoyed the accoutrement of Hollywood, if I enjoyed, Fashion Week.
Sure, yeah. And like front row
then I would do
placements
it.
kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah, if I enjoyed all the ancillary things, then I would do it. But it's, it's just not necessarily, it's something that always felt more depleting than invigorating. And then the prayer becomes, okay, well, how can I do the part that I love and the parts that I love? The parts that I love are the actual being on set part. And funny enough, I know plenty of actors who are like, I hate press or whatever, but I'm like, I love the projects I work on. So I enjoy having great conversations about the projects that I work on.
I've had that same conversation with my favorite person to interview, and the person I've interviewed the most is Allison Williams. And she's like, I consider that she's like, it's just as big of a commitment as the role that I take. She's like, which doesn't mean that I think less of the role that I take. It just means I think that highly of talking about it. And if I didn't want to talk about something this much, I wouldn't do it.
Correct. Same.
Yeah.
Full same.
Yeah.
Full same. If I'm reading something, I'm like, I'm gonna talk about this in press. And I always joke too. One of my closest friends and mentors, Darnell Martin, she was like, DeWanda, it's not that we're not trying to sell out, it's that no one's buying it. I feel like Hollywood can
That's me.
I feel like they can smell it on me at this point. They just know.
Well, it's one of the most fun exercises of this podcast is that when I watch things or I rewatch things and I'm watching it through the specific lens of the person I'm going to talk to and the research that I'm doing going into the conversation, it was so interesting. It becomes so interesting to see the things that I see people say so often reaffirming the character choice or creating a through line within the character choice, and watching Secret Life of Bees after reading so many interviews of yours and coming into this. I was watching this self-sustaining ecosystem of these three Black women who fortify their world. They're not a part of the greater world that exists, but they create such a peaceful and nourishing and self-sustaining space for themselves because they know at the end of the day that's what's going to take care of them, not anything outside of it that they might need either validation or support from. And so it was cool to see it felt like your ethos reflected in the quotes that I read from you that was also sort of coming through the dynamic that was forged between these women in this movie.
Quite deeply. Wow, that's really astute. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, and so it made for an interesting contrast, too, of seeing this character of May, who was just so, who is obviously clearly a strong individual, but is so tender to the world and kind of that nerve out in the open.
Miss May, I know you get real sad sometimes. My daddy never feels. He never felt anything. I'd rather be like you.
A worker bee weighs less than a flower petal, but she can fly with a load heavier than her. But she only lives 4 or 5 weeks. Sometimes not feeling is the only way you can survive.
And then to read so much from you and such sort of courage of your conviction and candor in where you stand. And I wonder if that is, and not that the character of May is absent that, but what she expresses out into the world is something so much more sort of like a flower petal, something so much more sort of tender to the touch. And I wondered if that if that fortification was something that was a learned thing from you as you came through a world that like sort of asks you to compromise often, or was that an easy thing to fold into your life and career in Hollywood because it was something you carried with you even from the time, like you said, you started acting when you were small, when you were a teenager?
Yeah, I think I am both mindful of like protecting that softness in and of myself and for others, you know. Like I feel like when I'm out and working, I'm out in the world, I have accumulated and taken the care that I need in the meantime to be able to, like, you know, be the leader I need to be.
Yeah.
You know, to not weep every day unless I'm doing it on set, you know?
Well, have you seen that Kristen Bell quote where she was on Ellen long ago, and she's like, she's like, on a scale of 1 to 10, if I'm not between a 3 and a 6, I'm crying. If I'm too happy, I'm crying. If I'm too sad,
Correct.
I'm crying. It's that
Correct.
3 and 6 window that she has to sit in. Otherwise, it's falling apart.
It's 3 and 6. It's 3 and 6, you know, but I recognize that for most people, you know, especially folks who are not as well researched as you are, for most people, you know, and because I'm a Black woman and that comes with its own like sense, its own set of presumptions, right? People are like, oh my God, DeWanda, she's fierce.
Right.
I'm like, sure. Sure. But really, you know, I'm more interested in the spaces where I don't require armor. I don't require, you know, that kind of like high grade navigation, which is just like the thought process of, oh, I have to be really tactful and really strategic in this moment so that like I don't say the wrong thing, to set off X, Y, Z, you know. So yeah, I really treasure and value obviously my home. And, you know, my living space. I do live in a
the
very
kitchen,
like
the hearth, the home.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's not, I wouldn't say, I don't need to say. It's like definitely have that kind of like industry, you know, reputation for like just a strong sense of like, I love myself enough to, you know, to advocate for myself. But it's lovely when I don't have to.
Right. Yeah. It's like, can I have the luxury of not having to protect myself, please? And unfortunate that is a luxury of not having to kind of constantly protect oneself. Well, and so I've read too that you wanted like that, you know, what draws you to character in that just like really pursuing character roles out of intention and not wanting to overwork or overextend. The character that, like, let's talk about the newer work, like in Imaginary. What was it about the character in Imaginary that was that latch point to you? Since that really is, like, you will leave it on the table if it's not there.
Yeah. It was her softness. I was like, to that point, you know, part of the reason why people are like, oh, DeWanda's so strong is because they'll see like a Kayla in Jurassic. Or because when they see she's got to have it, something that I always thought was interesting is people they see Nola's strength a lot, but they don't really feel how wildly vulnerable is. Like she's deeply vulnerable, you know, but I don't think it doesn't necessarily like register to people. Because I also think that, you know, we naturally need heroes.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's part of it. I think it's just human nature to want, you know what I mean? You know, to want to see these characters who are sticking up for themselves or, you know, facing institutions or, you know, facing really hard things. So that's kind of what we take away because that's what like gives us courage, you know? So I remember, you know, when I met with Jeff for Imaginary, he was just like, hey, you know, DeWanda, the only thing I'm worried about is that you come across as very capable. And I was like, well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I am quite capable, but also I am tired. And I don't need to be, you know, the capable, heroic one.
Yeah. You know what is the thing that has actually stuck with me most from Imaginary? I think that movie manages to become one of the most poignant comments on our abandonment of our elders that I've ever seen. When you guys are in the imagination world and that woman gives that speech about how you guys are going to stay there because you can be whatever you want and you can be young again. I was like, this is such a portrait of how we surrender our elders to loneliness and the epidemic of loneliness among old. I was like, I cried when I first saw it because I was like, I didn't expect this in this movie, but it really manages. You want to talk about a latching on point? I was like, well, goddamn, that's beautiful. That is fortifying this movie for me right now.
I was super moved. You know, the thought of Jessica having relinquished all those years of a relationship with her father, that similarly, just cracked me open, you know, just that notion that he's in this institution, in this home, just kind of wasting away unloved. It just broke my heart.
It's time for a quick break, but I'll be right back with more from DeWanda Wise. Then I'll have one quick thing about the upcoming, not official at all and unrelated Beekeeper sequel that's not a Beekeeper sequel, but is like the Beekeeper, THELMA, starring June Squibb. So stick around to the end because we've got lovely things to say about it.
In 1979, singer Miki Matsubara cut Stay With Me, a love song that hit big in her home country of Japan.
Stay with me.
The song has almost 500 million plays on streaming apps.
But Miki Matsubara didn't get to enjoy all that renewed interest. She died in 2004. In fact, she had burned all of her music, and she literally asked everyone she knew to forget her.
I'm Christian Dueñas.
I'm Yosuke Kitazawa.
On our new podcast, Primer, we celebrate unforgettable music from outside the English-speaking world, starting with Japanese city pop.
We'll cover Miki's work and others in conversation with Devendra Banhart, Umi, Dame Funk, and more.
Get Primer on MaximumFun.org or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Emily Fleming.
And I'm Jordan Morris.
We're real comedy writers.
And real friends.
And real fucking cheapskates.
We say, why subscribe to expensive streaming services when you could stream tons of insane movies online for free?
As long as you're fine with 25 randomly inserted super loud car insurance commercials.
On our new podcast, Free with Ads, we review streaming movies from the darkest corner of the internet's bargain bin.
From the good to the weird to the holy shit, look at Jean-Claude Van Damme's big old butt.
Free with Ads, a free podcast about free movies that's worth the price of admission.
Every Tuesday on MaximumFun.org or your favorite pod spot.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. I've been talking with DeWanda Wise. Her latest is Imaginary, now available on streaming, and coming soon, you'll be able to see her in Chris Pine's directorial debut, Pool Man. That's where we'll pick up our conversation. Pool Man is coming out soon, and that was an initial suggestion for a character that you had said you'd felt seen by, was your character that you play in that. Please tell me about your character in Pool Man, as we, the world at large, are about to see it, but it's not quite out yet. But it's like, it looks from it's a kooky kind of noir crime comedy in which a optimistic pool man played by a shaggy Chris Pine who loves being a Los Angelino and wants to improve this world around him, improves this city. He gets tipped off from you that a city councilman he keeps lobbying is actually crooked, and from the trailers you almost look like it's like a His Girl Friday sort of situation.
Correct.
Yes. All right. Where are you? Tell me how you felt seen by that role. And what, obviously you're not going to give it all away, but, I would like to know, in your choices of very, strong amount of curation going into this, where was the hook in this character?
So, multiple things. I should say, the preface is, I'm not a femme fatale. So that is not what made me feel seen. There are no dead bodies anywhere.
But it's a really cool persona to maybe have.
Fantastic persona to have.
Yes.
Fantastic persona. But even before, I didn't start acting until I was 15. And I say that because I constantly work with young performers, so I feel like I was late somehow.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm like, you guys are cool.
Yeah.
But before that, probably my like earliest inspiration before I even realized it was happening, my earliest influence, I was always watching Turner Classic Movies and American Movie Classics. I was obsessed with them.
Yeah.
Like, don't know why. I'm like 8 years old, absolutely possessed by Lauren Bacall.
Lauren Bacall,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, absolutely, like, gobsmacked, to the point where, even before the TikTok girlies rating thrift stores. Like, I was always a thrifty. I was always wearing this kind of like, not now.
Yeah.
Like, not right now. I always had that kind of aesthetic and that sensibility. So that's on one hand. On one hand, it was the very simple experience of getting to play a role that never in a trillion years would I have thought that I would have had an opportunity to play.
Yeah.
Like, not just type, but also literally her name is June Del Rey. She is ripped out of the 1940s.
Oh yes, that's amazing. And in an LA movie too. That's the best setting to drop a character that's ripped out of the 1930s is in Los Angeles, noir Los Angeles.
Yes, in noir Los Angeles. And then, between that and Chris Pine and I have like very interesting things in common, right? And this is everyone's, plight in Hollywood.
Sure.
Like, we're all born into whatever type we are, but there's like the type we are, and then there's like the real person we are.
Of course, yeah.
And sometimes that gap is like really narrow.
Yeah.
And sometimes that gap is really wide.
Yeah.
And with me and Chris Pine, that gap is really wide.
That's fun.
Like, Hollywood is like, Chris Pine is a pretty prince.
Yes.
Sure.
You're like, he convincingly pretends that, yes.
Yeah, he does a great job.
Yeah.
Like, does a great job, being a very handsome, debonair, pretty prince, and absolutely has great sense of style, like the whole bit.
Yeah.
He's also wildly smart.
Yeah, the most common paparazzi photo of Chris Pine is coming out of the bookstore in Los Feliz with like a paper bag bursting at the seams.
That's not him trying to impress anybody. That is just like legit, that's who he is. And, the process of constructing her, sometimes I'll hit up a director and I'll be like, hey, let me know if there's anything I can watch, anything I can read, just let me know if I love a research. Learning is one of my love languages.
Okay.
And, the back and forth we had on that movie, the film references I was like watching during it, just the shorthand we had on set. He could just be like, oh, Faye Dunaway. I'd be like, gotcha.
Great.
Say less.
That's wonderful.
So just experientially felt super seen and had been wanting to do something. As weird as I am, like, as weird. Yeah. I was like, anyone?
Yeah, this looks like a goofier Under the Silver Lake, where it just like you're. I feel like I haven't seen it yet, and I already feel like I'm ready to program a double feature of just a bunch of strange folks.
Yes, correct.
Well, and another thing, something that I wanted to ask you about was like self-generating work. When I listened to the podcast that you and your husband made, you were talking about. He was talking about like like your sort of propensity to be like provide and share, and him being like, DeWanda, we don't have any money. Like, you can't give away the money that we don't have. But like talking about, when he found success in Underground and then investing that into the movie you were making, how to know you're a douchebag? How do you know if you're a douchebag?
Yeah, how to tell you're a douchebag.
How to tell you're a douchebag, which you're an executive producer on and a star. So were you leading the charge on that? And obviously you're an EP on Imaginary. And I wanted to hear from you about, like, again, like kind of going back to that through line of like, I'm watching Secret Life of Bees and being like, this is a group of women who are a product of their self-determination and they're creating their own path. And as inexplicable as it may seem in their context. And you seem like somebody who, from not waiting for somebody to give you a permission to be a leader in the work that you do, but sort of taking those reins. And I wanted to hear about that in your sort of curation process.
Yeah, I think part of it is just, I can trace a through line of kind of self-efficacy. And I think it's just always been a value, that notion that, you have some semblance, right? Because there are plenty of forces outside of our control.
Right.
But that simple semblance of like, there's always something you can do.
Yeah.
So I think it's between that and, I was like the kind of kid who was always like, I started a club when I was at NYU that still exists to this day. It was when I was training there weren't many, basically all the people of color, because there's so many training programs at Tisch, there's different schools, right?
Yeah.
So all the people of color, we were kind of like in these, it was very disparate. Like me and my class, it was literally just me and Gina Rodriguez. Like,
right. You've known her since Tisch. Yeah.
I've known her since Tisch. And that's out of a class of like 80, just the two of us.
Wow.
So I started a club called The Collective, where we could all convene like after, training and just work on scenes and, work that we wouldn't really have an opportunity to work on in our individual studios. So I've just always been, and I started clubs in high school. So there's always been this part of me that I liken to my grandfather, Ellis Wise. He owned a huge junkyard on the East Coast in like the 50s, 60s, 70s, like back when that was like not something that a Black man would be doing. So I just always had this notion, this sense that, if it didn't exist, then I would do my best to build it, And between that and I trained at the Atlantic, and the Atlantic was just always like create your own work, create your own work, create your, that's like their huge ethos. So when I graduated from NYU, anyone who is a keen observer of my resume, you see all these short films.
Right. Yeah.
And, if you're an actor working on a short out of these training programs, you have other credits that are not credits on the short. You know what I mean? Like you're a filmmaker, like you're hands-on, you're in whatever, you're doing wardrobe, you're doing hair and makeup, you're like a grip, you're working on sound, it's all hands on deck. And I still very much have that, in me. I just more than anything, I consider myself, a filmmaker, and we are absolutely, I don't believe in vanity announcements. Like I never, I think that's wild that people just be announcing stuff. And then 10 years later, you're like, whatever happened?
Yeah. It's a whole cottage industry in Hollywood.
You know what I'm saying? It's just like, oh, y'all just like, that goes back to the the Hollywood part, right?
Right, yeah. It's like, it's a trade placement. It wasn't happening. It was a trade placement. I understand. I got you.
To make something else happen. Yeah. I don't do that. Like the team knows. So, there are things. I will have plenty of those. This took 5 years.
Yeah.
This took 6 years. This took 10 years. Like I will have, let's talk in a couple of years. And you'll be like, okay, how long was that percolating?
Okay, well, I'm going to hold you to that. I'm going to come back in 5 to 10 years and I'm going to be like, we're re-upping this. And
absolutely.
A thing that I read you talking about when I think it might have been when you were talking about She's Gotta Have It, and there was a quote you had given to the Hollywood Reporter where you were talking about that what you had done and the parts that you had been exposed to had already so surpassed what you had thought would even be viable options for what you were going to do, that you were like, I'm clearly not dreaming enough because I didn't dream of this. And now with a femme fatale, though you are not, but with a femme fatale and growing up on TCM and playing Enola Darling and being where do you find has your capacity for your imagination in what is available to you grown? Or is it something that you have to fight to grow amidst a sort of challenging industry that does move very slow and is a lot of shadow play and smoke and mirrors? And I wanted to hear about your own capacity for dreaming your work going forward.
I wish it were higher. I mean, I think because to your point, there is a deep layer of, I am extremely pragmatic, and realistic. And I'm also, I feel like I would be foolhardy to look at the careers of my idols, essentially, or the women who have come before me and go that won't apply to me. So there is a part of me that's like just immensely grounded, or just like, you know, honest, like really honest with myself in that respect. But I do continue to, maybe because of that, probably because of that, I continue to feel like really surprised.
Yeah.
Like, and I guess maybe that might be a trauma response. It might just be me, you know, just trying to be like, oh, let me keep my expectations low so that, you know, I don't like lose that sense of gratitude. But truly every time, you know, someone calls me, and like even the thing that I did like 2 seconds ago, that's like, you know, took 3 days to film. Like I remember getting the text and feeling like, oh, so nice. Thank you for seeing me in this light. Like whenever something I really respond to finds me, you know, it always feels like deeply satisfying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like deeply, deeply, deeply satisfying.
It's a difficult thing. We're very different positions, you and I, but I feel like I find myself in a similar, like, reconciling the notion of like a unshaking, unwavering belief and confidence in myself with like the surprise that like other people aren't just like constantly responding to that and being like, oh, well, obviously you'd be perfect for this and this and this and this. Just like, why am I not just like batting down offers all of the time?
Yo, not for nothing.
Is this a Gemini thing? Is this a Gemini thing? Is that part of who we are? But like how, like, I guess, and if I could just hear you talk a little bit about like how like that intrinsic, like it doesn't go anywhere sense of certainty, but also like the revitalized sense of surprise constantly when a good thing happens, but it's not surprise because you didn't think you were worthy, but it's like surprise because you're like, oh wow, you realized I'm worthy. Like I wanted to hear about you being able to do that little tap dance.
It's a weird dance.
It's so weird.
It's a weird dance. It's a weird dance. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I do think there's a part of me that wonders, you know, I had one of my former reps was just like, you know, at one point I was like, well, like, what is it? And they were like, oh, you might want to consider being on publicity all the time.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I was like, I ain't doing that.
Right. Yeah.
Even my publicist was like, you, DeWanda? You? No.
She's like, I'm on retainer and I'm telling you no.
It's wild. So, you know, there is a part of me that recognizes here's the dance. Here's the truth of the dance for me. This is why it's like a true dance. The truth of the dance for me is part of the reason I've been able to jump from genres and do all these different things is because people are always getting to know me for the first time.
Oh, fascinating. Okay.
So because there's no history, there's no sense of like, oh, we know what she can do.
Yeah.
Right. My team has to work very hard. I feel like every 5 seconds, they're like, we had to educate them about you. And I was like, that's fine. I mean, a tiny ego death. I don't care about that.
Sure,
like whatever, you know, gets the job done. So part of it is just the present state of the industry. You know, the fact that I'll have stuff on Netflix and then Twilight Zone will be all over here and then there'll be like a movie and I'm at the end of the day, yes, I'm a leading lady, but also like I really lean into character. So it takes people a long time if they ever do catch up. It's more often people go like, you know, oh, that was you too, which is what I want.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is what every actor wants, you know, but part of the cost of like not turning yourself into a brand is that people they don't automatically think like, oh, I need a blah, blah, blah type. And then you come to mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
Like so it's kind of there's a trade-off though, because then if you are I need this type or whatever, then there's a whole world of things you don't have access to. So I just have to be in pretty consistent communication with myself and really radically honest about it to be like, okay, am I ready to become a Kardashian or am I ready to like
talk about a brand? You talk about a brand. That is a very crystallized brand.
Very, very crystallized brand. Am I gonna do this thing that probably wouldn't feel good? Because to your earlier point about the relationships, like I'm going to be a different person in a year. Like, I'm not even going to know who I am. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
I can't commit to being any.
I did hear you say you part of the joy of becoming an actor was that you're a serial quitter, and that allows you to quit and start something new all the time, which I think is a great approach to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what's your favorite subject in school?
English. I was planning on being a writer. I don't really think I got much of a future now, being an orphan and all.
Don't writers, like, just imagine things you don't see? You should imagine yourself having a future. That's what I do.
I sadly have to let you go, but I will say I will speak into existence. I saw you talking about like filmmakers that you would like to work with, and one of my favorite people I've ever interviewed, and just one of my favorite insurgent directors. I am crossing my fingers for DeWanda Wise and Nikiatu Jusu to unite, become a super being. And
did you know we worked together?
What were you in?
That's hilarious. So when I'm talking about the shorts, me and Nikiatu, we've worked on 2 shorts together.
Okay.
Like the one that we joked that was everywhere and just like lived for years and years, called African Booty Scratcher. It was like
I haven't seen African Booty Scratcher, but I remember I know the title African Booty Scratcher. Fantastic,
coming of age. And then the one that I used to your point about moving into spaces and one thing that was on my demo reel prominently for years, because I really wanted to get into the action space, was a film called Black Swan Theory.
Okay.
So yeah, we're waiting for the reunion.
Okay, great. The feature-length reunion.
Yeah, we need the feature reunion for sure.
Well, DeWanda Wise, thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate you talking with me today, and I cannot wait to see which chameleonic form you decide to introduce yourself to even more people through next.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much again to DeWanda Wise for helping me feel seen. And for the entire conversation, you can discover her over and over again across a lot of streaming services. But for now, I want you to highlight Imaginary, which you can rent or buy on any VOD service you like. And now, one quick thing before I go about, as I said before, THELMA. Not the excellent Norwegian sci-fi pseudo-superhero origin story movie from the late 2010s, starring Eiley Harbo. That movie rules. But the new THELMA, the one coming out in June, starring June Squibb, the 93-year-old living legend who is making her first top of the call sheet appearance in THELMA. I believe the tagline on the poster is "Revenge has never been sweeter." And this is, as I said at the top, this is June Squibb's Beekeeper. This is a sweet grandma who is scam called, made to worry that her grandson has had something terrible happen to him and he's in jail. And the only way he can get bailed out is if she sends thousands of dollars to this mailing address immediately. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to get him out of jail. So what does this loving grandma do but put that money in the post? And then, thankfully, quickly realizes that her grandson is all okay, perfectly intact. He's like her best friend. But then there's the matter of her money. And she has got to go get it back her damn self. Because you know what? Senior citizens are underestimated all the time. They are sadly invisible in our society. But June says, no, what? Not me. THELMA says, not me. I'm doing this on my own. Well, not necessarily on my own. I'm going to go get my dear friend, Richard Roundtree, and his electric scooter, and we're going to get that money back together. Guys, it is wonderful. It is delightful. It's better than I even hoped it would be. Please go see it in a theater. That's I don't want to say any of the little details about it because it's just so enjoyable. It's a family movie. It's a friend movie. It's a celebration of a career. It's a celebration of a life, both that of June Squibb and the real-life Thelma, director and writer Josh Margolin's real-life grandmother Thelma, who inspired the film. I just can't say enough about it. Thelma in theaters June 21st. I know you got out there to see Dune in IMAX, so take the time to go see Thelma in a theater. And that is all of our show. You did it. We did it. I did it. I got DeWanda Wise on here. Slam dunk. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at FeelingSeenPod or send us an email at feelingseen@MaximumFun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm JorCrew on Twitter. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. This show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows.
supported directly
by you.